Chase McGrath for the win for the Volunteers. From 40, on the way, a knuckleball. He got it!
How is everybody doing today? I am Colin Bashino, your host. A lot of people call me Bash. You can find me on TikTok, Bash's CFB Show. So make sure you follow me on Bash's CFB Show TikTok. We need to be more active on there. I know I've had such a busy last couple of weeks, but hey, we're going to get back rolling. I also need to be busier here on Twitter, but give me some reason to be busier. At Bash_CFB, go drop a follow there. If you want to catch the live streams, Bash_CFB. I apologize for the blanket back there. I totally forgot to move that. And again, I just ask you guys to follow here because opinion plus discussion equals community. I'm trying to build a community, and it's not just my opinion. It's your opinion. I just want you guys to have a discussion with me and shoot a discussion amongst one another. So make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. With that being said, let's get straight into the big game recaps, and then we're going to have a rapid recap, a little bit of a different version of this recap video. Ohio State, Maryland. I was at this game 37-17. I don't know why people are overreacting to Ohio State's offensive line issues. I get it. They did not run the ball at a super high clip, but I thought that they were, having some decent success on some runs. They were able to pop a few for a few yards, and you got to keep in mind their big play threat at running back was out in this game in Travion Henderson. Now they need to find that big play guy, whether it's Chip Traynham or Dallin Hayden or Mayan Williams. They need to find it, right? As far as the offensive line concerns go, again, it's been the same problem all year. It is something that's fixable. It is something that has looked good in moments like against Notre Dame. And that is blocking assignments, communication, and just figuring out who is getting to the second level and then being able to get there. I thought that Josh Fryer in the run game had his worst game of the year, and he's been very good this season. So not too much to be concerned about there. All I can tell you, though, is this defense is absolutely awesome. Bend but don't break, 100%. They're forcing disruption. The pick six to get the scoring started for Ohio State. The other big interception by Lathan Ransom after they had just been they were pressuring Talia all day long. Now, they need to start getting home when they get to pressuring other quarterbacks. I would get it if a guy like Talia would be able to escape. But other quarterbacks have escaped that are not nearly as athletic, like Sam Hartman, for example, as Talia. So Ohio State's front four, the only criticism you could have for them, they're great against the run right now. They're great against it as far as pass rush, but they aren't getting home. That is the one criticism you can give them. The linebackers are also not playing up to the level that they were last year. But thank goodness the secondary is playing at an outstanding level, elite level. Jordan Hancock got picked on a little bit, but overall not too much. And then Davison Igbinosun had a couple of bad moments. And Denzel Burke, outside of one kind of crappy situation that he was thrown in, he really is, again, just locking down one side of the field constantly. This Ohio State team looks legit. People are overreacting to how they looked against Maryland, especially in the first half. Maryland's a good team. That's all I got to say. This looked like one of the better Maryland teams that I have seen, certainly in person. And I have gone to see Maryland in person, I think, 3 times now, and ever since they've joined the Big Ten, maybe more than that. And certainly on TV, this also looks like one of the best versions. Texas, Oklahoma, 30-34. This one was an all-time classic coming down to the wire. Dylan Gabriel making the big plays. Texas not necessarily making the big plays. Now that there was a lot going on in this game, but overall, I just felt like Oklahoma, for the most part, outplayed Texas for the first 3 quarters. And then Texas outplayed them in the fourth quarter. But despite that, Oklahoma found themselves with the ball with minute 17 and had a chance to drive down the field and score. What does this mean for Oklahoma? Well, they have officially entered the chat. They got to be careful not to be looking ahead. They got to be careful in some of these games. They play like Kansas. They play at Oklahoma State, who just beat Oklahoma or Kansas State at home. This is a relatively easy schedule for Oklahoma going forward until the Big 12 championship, where we all presume Texas will be awaiting. But they got to make sure they don't trip up. Now, on the Texas side of things, you beat Alabama. It affords you the luxury of being able, especially if Alabama keeps winning, affords you the luxury of losing a game like this and then going ahead, especially when it's very likely that you're going to get another shot at that team that you lost to. You lost to them on a neutral site. It was a heck of a game. It was a battle until the very end. They got outplayed. They have some things to fix. They are far from a perfect team, but they're more of an inconsistent team rather than a team full of holes per se. Like, I don't look at this Texas team and I'm like, oh, that's their glaring weakness. No, I'm like, oh, there were moments there where receivers really weren't getting open. Oh, there were moments, and that was early in the game. Oh, there were moments where their secondary looked a little suspect. And not having Jalen Catalon is something that some team, or some people, man, I am screwing up my words today. Some people are not going to look at. But they were missing an experienced safety and plugging in a freshman back there at safety, and that was Jalen Catalon. Does he make the difference? Well, when the margins are this thin, yes, it could make a difference. So we'll see. Hopefully Jalen Catalon, a player that I've liked for the last few years, is healthy. This Texas team is much better with him in the lineup. As far as Oklahoma goes, again, great statement win for Oklahoma. Great win for Brent Venables. And now just you're 6-0 through half of the season. Finish it, right? Go 6-0. Finish 6-0. And that's what we need to see for the Oklahoma Sooners. So back half of the year, go 6-0. LSU 49, Missouri 39. It looked like Missouri was going to run away with it. And again, people who question the culture of Brian Kelly should stop. Brandon Walker, you overreacting to what LSU has, should stop, right? Because the culture is still very strong at LSU. They were playing for something. They know that everything's still ahead of them. I think they realized after the Florida State game that they had no margin for error. And then when they lost to Ole Miss last week in a heartbreaker, they still recognized we aren't done, though. Like, we have a lot to play for still. If nothing else but pride, that SEC championship is still well within reach. Well within reach. And this was a tough test against a really good top 25 Missouri team. And yes, I still believe they're top 25. They have one of the best players in America in Luther Burden, who, by the way, went off on their secondary like I said he would. But this LSU offense pulled a rabbit out of a hat and was able to get it going in the second half. And that defense was good enough in the second half to be able to pull away. As far as what happened in this game, by the way, a lot of people are just looking at the final score and they're like, okay, LSU pulled away. No, this was down to the wire. And LSU scoring late. This was a great game. Great game. Battled by both sides. Very evenly matched. In Missouri, they've been talking about this game since the final of that Kansas State game. They walk out of this one heartbroken, but still knowing themselves that all their goals are still ahead of them. They still have Tennessee at home. They still have Georgia, but they cannot overlook a team that just got thrashed 13-51 in Kentucky. Now, we'll get to that game in a second, but we have Alabama at Texas A&M. Absolute disastrous finish to this game for Texas A&M. Absolute disastrous fourth quarter for Texas A&M. So first off, unlucky when it comes to the Jace McClellan play, trying to get off the field, get the ball back to their offense. Jace McClellan's knees on the ground, but he bobbles it, gets back on his feet. Great awareness by Jace McClellan to be able to do that, pick up the first down, run out the clock. Was there a second left? Probably. Who cares, though? It would have been a super long shot for Max Johnson to make that play. But their offensive line absolutely collapsed in the fourth quarter. Everybody was getting pressure on Max Johnson. Dallas Turner's still a filthy player, by the way. I don't know how people miss the fact that he just keeps doing this stuff to like players. And I'm done talking about it. I made a TikTok about it, and he's going to continue doing this and nobody's going to call him out. The broadcast crew never calls him out, never even realizes it. I guess CBS just never alerts Brad and Gary, which Gary doesn't even know what's going on half the time. But regardless of this, Alabama deserved to win this game despite the mistakes, despite 14 penalties, despite the fact that they found themselves in very vulnerable situations over and over and over and over again. They end up getting the safety that really put this one away. I know Texas A&M had the field goal to make it close again, but at the end of the day, that's what Alabama hung their hat on, was that safety. And that safety pretty much won them the game. And unfortunately for Texas A&M, they're going to walk out of this one with their second loss of the season, the one against Miami. And I'll talk about Miami when we do our rapid recap, because that's going to be a big game that I highlight in the rapid recap that I don't have a graphic for. This Alabama team, they're inside track West champs probably. I mean, you still got tough challenges ahead. You got Tennessee, but even if you lose that game, you still control your own destiny. You got LSU, but with the way LSU secondary is looking, I'm not sure if LSU is going to be able to go into Tuscaloosa and win. And you have Auburn late in the year. We saw Auburn give Georgia everything they can handle, and Auburn's just going to be better then. That could be where Alabama could trip up. But if I'm Texas A&M, like, I'm a huge fan of Tennessee after next week, because, of course, this upcoming week, you have to go to Neyland. And you cannot lose that game. Now, Tennessee cannot lose that game either on their side of things, but Texas A&M absolutely, for this game, for this narrative for Jimbo Fisher not to be driven that he needs to go. This A&M team is just the same result in a different year, too talented for what their record is. That narrative is going to be driven if they lose next week in Neyland. It's a must-win for Jimbo Fisher, if you ask me, as much as a must-win has been in his career. But Alabama, they have breathing room right now, and I'll be curious to see what they look like moving forward. How about this one? 51-13, absolute domination. I took Kentucky to cover, but I said this caveat, right? Kentucky's going to cover, but I don't know if this is going to be the situation where Georgia ends up pulling away, or if they're going to continue to mess around. And I'm going to pick against them until they end up stop messing around. Well, maybe I shouldn't have picked against them, and it was part of walk that line, and that was on me because I knew there was a chance of this exact thing happening to on the Kentucky side of things, because they tend to do this anytime they're serious, just get absolutely ran off the field against somebody, or Georgia just absolutely running it up after being doubted a couple of times in a row with South Carolina and Auburn. Those games go the way that it did. Carson Beck looked like a stud. Carson Beck looked like the player I expected him to be. He looked like one of the best quarterbacks in America. And this Georgia defense bowed up against the run game of Kentucky, albeit it does help when Devin Leary cannot throw an accurate pass. And it also does help that every single big play that Kentucky made in the first half to try to match Georgia, because Georgia scored on their first 6 possessions. So they were trying to score with Georgia, but every time Kentucky had a big play, they got behind the sticks by some stupid penalty, which is a theme for another team in blue and another Wildcat team that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Michigan dominating Minnesota. This probably maybe should have been left off the board. My goodness, this was never even close. I took Michigan to cover, but I was like, oh, maybe Minnesota gives them a game for a little bit. No, not even a little bit. And I was impressed with Michigan 100%, but this Minnesota team is very bad. They are not very good on defense. They're pretty average. I mean, they're not bad, but they're pretty average. They have a couple of really good players, but outside of that, they really just aren't that good. And their offense would be really good if they had a quarterback, and Nathan Kaliakmanis is horrible. And that first pick 6 that Michigan had on that second play of the game exemplifies that. Nathan Kaliakmanis is terrible. And the fact that PJ Fleck said that he's an NFL guy, this dude is just a used car salesman. He's terrible. I'm not a fan of what PJ Fleck is doing, because I feel like he's got his best skill that he has had in his tenure at Minnesota, and is completely wasted by terrible quarterback play. You should have went to the portal. I don't know what to tell you. Notre Dame 20, Louisville 33. Notre Dame ran out of gas. This was a game at halftime. This was a game for a while, but overall, they ran out of gas and they played the team with a lot of team speed and also a Jeff Brom guy that is somewhat familiar with how to score on athletic defenses like this and how to just be able to put up points. But that offense was stifled by this really good Notre Dame team and this defense. I think the defense was holding it down for just too long, and some of the mistakes that their offense was making down the stretch just looked like a team that was just exhausted from the stretch. But guess what, Notre Dame? Nobody feels bad for you. This is a game you should win. This is a game that you need to be up for and that you brought in Sam Hartman to get you to win. And guess what Sam Hartman wasn't able to do? Win. Sam Hartman was just not good enough. And albeit, I think it's because he does not have the NFL arm and he's not an NFL quarterback. But it also has to do with the fact that I've been saying this for weeks. Notre Dame just doesn't have receivers. And their interior of their offensive line, again, got ate up. They're not good. They have two really good tackles who, by the way, Joe Alt kept getting smoked. So there goes your top tackle talk with Olu Fashanu. You're not even in that conversation. We have multiple other players that are going to be in that conversation over you. Now, Joe Alt, this was a terrible game that you put on tape by Joe Alt. But that offensive line was always anchored by the outside because Mitchell Evans was really good in the blocking game as a tight end as well as a receiving game too. He's been a really good receiver for them, and they've had two anchors at tight end, and their interior has been their struggle. Showed up yet again, and the receivers are just not getting open. Now, if your receivers aren't getting open, how about you just play a team that'll let them be open on you? And that is the USC Trojans. But before we get to USC, we got Fresno State 19, Wyoming 24. This game played out very similarly to what I thought it would play out. Wyoming had control of this most of the way. Fresno State had a late run at it. They ended up cutting it, I think, to 24-16, then 24-19 off of a field goal. This Wyoming team, I said wrong team favored. I took them money line. I took them against the spread. I thought they were 100% going to win. Now they have to gear up because they're going to have to play at Air Force next week, and Air Force is off of a bye. Ouch when it comes to that schedule. As far as Fresno goes, they still control their own destiny. There's still divisions in the Mountain West, and they're in the West Division. They're away from Wyoming. They're away from Air Force. They don't play Air Force unless they play each other in the conference championship. And the West seems so winnable right now for Fresno State. So they just got to bounce back, just keep playing their ball, say, hey, that was a tough game. We lost our first game of the year. Let's not lose again. And we could very easily see a 10 or 11 win team in Fresno State play a 10 or 11, maybe even to 12 in Air Force's case, win team between the winner of Air Force and Wyoming. We could very easily see that. I'm going to be very interested in Air Force Wyoming. It is a game that's going to get a preview. We will talk about it next week. But Fresno State, time to bounce back. Wyoming, time to get back up yet again for a road trip to Colorado Springs. USC, lucky to escape with this win. Let me just exemplify this for you. Quite literally, every single regulation touchdown that USC scored was off of an Arizona mistake. Whether it was multiple dumb penalties or dumb penalty on, I remember one on fourth down, one on a third down. They were going to get off the field on two separate drives. They ended up making a dumb penalty, dumb mistake. One of them was a roughing the passer that just didn't need to happen. Another one was a pass interference that, again, really didn't need to happen. And USC was able to score points off of that. They scored points off of a turnover. They were able to benefit off of these mistakes, but I'm going to focus on the story that nobody's going to focus about. If you are a true college football fan, you know what I'm talking about. This same thing happened to Arizona against Mississippi State. Arizona in this game looked like the better team. Their defense was super intense. Their defense looked better than USC on defense for dang sure. And that offense was going toe-to-toe, if not outplaying, due to the fact that they were playing against a very weak defense. USC, they had this game won. They looked like the better football team. And this is the second time that Arizona made mistakes to lose a game when they looked like the better football team. Jacob Cowing played out of his mind. Tiatora, or however you say it, Mitchell, the kid that, everybody knew about last year, was, I think, a 5-star receiver. He came in as a freshman, made an immediate impact with this offense. Jacob Cowing and Dorian Singer, who, by the way, is still kind of not showing up for USC, but I digress. These guys played out of their minds, and Noah Fafita deserves a lot of credit for how he played. But at the end of the day, these Arizona mistakes, they turned the ball over 5 times against Mississippi State, lost the turnover battle 5-1, and they lost in overtime. Well, you don't go to overtime if you don't turn over the ball, right? You should have been able to dominate Mississippi State on the road, and you should have been able to dominate USC on the road. And Washington, probably the best team in the Pac-12, and I think we have that answer coming up here in next week's game between Washington and Oregon, but certainly a top 3 team in the Pac-12. You were able to go, maybe not toe-to-toe, but give them a game at home when you played mistake-free football for the most part and caused mistakes on the other side. Well, I hate to break it to you, as many people might have reflected on this game and remembered a couple of USC mistakes, a lot of that happened on the final drive throughout the entire second half, mostly, but second quarter as well. After the first quarter where Arizona jumped out 17-0, Arizona just kept gifting USC mistakes and points. As far as USC goes, they have a ceiling here. If they somehow manage to win the Pac-12 and get to the college football playoff, they are not doing anything with that, just like any other Lincoln Riley team. But hate to break it to you, Lincoln, you actually have teams that have a great offense but play pretty complementary defense up in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon and Washington. And that's not even to mention Oregon State, who does the same thing. That's not even to mention your crosstown rival in UCLA, who seemingly does the same thing. You guys are struggling really bad, and it's simply because of this. Lincoln Riley has not changed anything about his program. That's the problem, and that's what we have to deal with, and USC has a certain ceiling because of it. It is what it is. All right, some college football scores. We're just going to run through the big headliners. Oklahoma State beating Kansas State at home in Boone Pickens, 29-21, in a game that they pretty much dominated. Kansas State never really gave themselves a true shot. Alan Bowman looked good in this game. How about this one right here? Florida State, Virginia Tech, 39-17, a little bit of a struggle to victory again for Florida State. I don't really think they're blowing out anybody, guys. I really don't. Now, Trey Benson finally showed up. He hasn't really been anywhere fantastic all season long, but man, that was a tough one. A tough pill to swallow for Florida State fans, because you're looking at this, all right, we're winning, but we still have tough games on our schedule. And I'll talk about one of their tough teams on their schedule coming up. Washington State and UCLA. How about this? This UCLA team coming back from a couple of weeks ago when they struggled against Utah. Schedule dynamics do mean everything, but they struggled offensively against Utah. Was able to go up against this experienced squad in Washington State and look tremendously better. Well, Washington State's defense is not that good. Well, no, they have been really good all year long. Very comparable to the Utah Utes, but UCLA off a bye. Guess what that is for a Chip Kelly coach team, but B, a freshman quarterback. It's a gift. It is a massive gift. North Carolina blows out Syracuse. I think Syracuse is a pretty decent team too. This was very impressive by North Carolina. Way better team than I thought. 52-40. Cal was kind of chasing points the entire game. Couldn't really stop Oregon State's offense, but this one was a tight one at halftime. Like, it was 21-17, and it was also a tight one entering the fourth quarter. Like, Oregon State ended up having to pull away, but Cal did a good job of chasing points. They just couldn't stop DJ Uiagalelei in this passing attack. 5 throwing touchdowns. Shows you that Brandon Streeter was the problem at Clemson. Ole Miss, a big time win in a letdown spot at home, against Arkansas. Yeah, this was a huge letdown spot. Now, I thought more points would be scored in this game than 27-20, but huge letdown spot where KJ Jefferson played a pretty solid game, had those couple of turnovers, but this was definitely one that Ole Miss was, tough-minded and was able to pull it out and stay within the race of the SEC West, because hate to break it to you, you lose this game, you're out. Georgia Tech scores with about a second left because of coaching blunders. But, hey, first off, why didn't Mario listen to himself about what happened against Stanford back in 2018? But that has been a ran thing in social media. That's immediately what I thought about when I thought about Mario Cristobal and his coaching decision. I'm like, well, this ain't the first time this has happened. Credit to Georgia Tech for sticking in this game. And this also does not mean Miami's a bad team or back down the drain. I still think Miami's a really good team with a lot of potential. This was a look-ahead spot to a big game in Chapel Hill next week, and it's going to show a lot about their culture, how they show up against North Carolina next week. LSU, we already recapped that. Boston College and Army was very interesting, by the way. Boston College scores a late touchdown. Thomas Castellanos was able to get 4 rushing touchdowns in this game. Very impressive for him. Wisconsin beats Rutgers. Michigan fans, I told you Rutgers wasn't really all that good. NC State holds off a Marshall offense. By the way, the over hitting 48-41. It looks like Robert and I's offense is kicking into gear there. Pardon me, at NC State. UTSA takes care of business at Temple on the road, 49-31 or 34. Iowa 20, Purdue 14. First game without their guy, Cade McNamara, and it looked pretty solid. They were comfortably up and took a late touchdown for Purdue to cut the deficit, and Iowa was able to survive and hold off the late rally by the Purdue Boilermakers because, again, they play really good defense, and it is what it is, you know. Nothing else I could really say about that. How about this? Clemson 17, Wake Forest 12. This was a pathetic game. It was gross. Clemson still kind of stinks. Not going to lie. Louisiana won a big game in Cajun Field, 34-30 against G.J. Kinney and this explosive Texas State offense. A very big game for the Sun Belt West right there. 2 teams that feel like they could contend in year 1 under G.J. Kinney and year 2 under, I'm drawing a blank on Louisiana's coach, but this coaching staff, and a huge late game rally for Louisiana to win this one. All right. Any other key games that jump out? Kansas beats UCF. They dominated this game more than the score even indicated, 51-22, but it took 2 late touchdowns for UCF to close that gap. They were dominant, the Kansas Jayhawks. Big response off of that Texas game last week in which they got beat, pretty embarrassingly on the road at Texas. 27-24, Colorado holds off Arizona State. A, Arizona State, just like I said in the preseason, definitely playing a lot better, but B, Colorado just playing down to the level of competition yet again. Great game plan. This defense for Arizona State is not half bad, but man, this Colorado team needs to play better than that if they want to compete against better teams later in their schedule. And we have Texas Tech dominating Baylor. Texas Tech looking more like the preseason version that I expected them to be. Iowa State beating TCU. Very impressive win for Iowa State, but this TCU team, man, they look terrible. And Chandler Morris, it looks like he's going to be out for the year from what I've heard. Utah State 44, Colorado State 24. And I thought that Colorado State had this one after they jumped out 17-3. I'm like, wow, okay. And then bang. What a huge comeback and absolute great defense by Utah State and to be able to win this game by 20. And speaking of comebacks, by the way, what Boise State was able to do to come back at home and shut out San Jose State in the second half to do so, tremendous job, 35-27. Boise State and Andy Avalos gets back in the win column after having a struggle of a start to start the year, 2-3 start, and it looked for a while it was going to be a 2-4 start. All right, we're going to get back to the presentations here. We are going to get to my top 25. But first, Walk That Line had another bad week. We start out 1-3 with this. Wisconsin did not cover a backdoor cover for Rutgers. That would have pushed me at 500. Just a little spoiler alert. Thank you, UTSA, for covering. We're 1-1 there. But USF got beat down by UAB. My bad on that. Kentucky got beat down by Georgia. My bad on that. 1-3 right there. I told you guys it was not going to be a good week. And honestly, finding 12 games to play, like I did not like that many, though. I should have just listened to Josh Pate. He went 9-0. That over for Arkansas Ole Miss surprisingly did not hit. 47 hit. 47 was the number, so they weren't even close. Notre Dame did not cover. I thought they had enough in the tank to be able to do it. And I think if you play that game 10 times, they're able to cover that 6 points like 6 or 7 out of 10 times. I think they're still a better team than Louisville, but Louisville got a pretty dominant and astounding win. I was 100% on Wyoming and Texas Tech, though, taking those W's. So that pushes us to what? That's 2-2. So we're 3-5 right now. And then we go 5-7. Colorado only scored 27, and Oklahoma State won the game outright. I did not think they'd be able to score on Kansas State's defense, but that's my bad again for playing a Friday night home dog to score less than 20.5. My bad. I was hoping that if Oklahoma State were to win, it would be something like 20-14. It wasn't. But Arizona came through for me. I also played Arizona money line, and that was so close to hitting at like plus 1,000. It was crazy. But plus 22 hit, over 24.5 hit. And that was pretty good. Here's my top 25. Let's just quickly run through this. Number 1, Georgia. They look like the best team in America still, and I told you guys I'm not moving them off until they lose anyway. Number 2, Washington. Still feel like they looked like the best team, most impressive team through the first few weeks, though Georgia kind of made up that ground. I still think Washington looks really impressive. Number 3, Michigan. They just haven't really played anybody. Like, Washington's resume is a lot better. I think Arizona is a better team than anything that Michigan has played. And I do definitely think that Boise State is just as good as anybody's that Michigan's played. So, and they were able to dominate them in more of a convincing fashion. And I do feel like Boise State has a very strong defense. But there's Michigan. They still look really impressive. Ohio State, not panic mode for them. Number 5, Oregon. A lot of people are going to sleep on Oregon. This is going to be a big-time matchup. I think it should be a top 5 matchup. Then we get number 6, Oklahoma. I don't want to jump off the rails and overreact to a game against Texas, but, man, they looked really good. Number 7, Florida State. Number 8, Penn State. Not much to say there. Number 9, Texas. The margins between Oklahoma and Texas were very thin, and I think putting them here as the top 1-loss team, especially after they went on the road to beat Alabama, very impressive. Number 10, North Carolina. They look really impressive. I think that they could potentially throw a wrench into the playoff. I was holding off on saying anything about this, especially as somebody who did not pick North Carolina to do anything spectacular this year. The way they have started this season, they are a contender for the ACC. And by connection, if they are a 1-loss ACC champ, they will get consideration for the college football playoff. Alabama at number 11, just quietly kind of doing it, even though they had a national game that a lot of people were watching at that 3:30 hour. Alabama, they look really solid. We'll see if they can continue to keep this up. They're the favorites in the West. Number 12, USC. Speaking of out West, this is probably the worst defense out West. I don't know what to tell you. This is terrible for USC. Number 13, Oregon State. They looked really good against Cal offensively, but that defense, that secondary specifically, needs to get buttoned up. Number 14, Ole Miss. They look good, and they were able to win in a style that is not necessarily conducive to them, in a little bit of a letdown spot after LSU was also able to take care of business in a letdown spot. Number 15, Louisville. What a big-time statement win for Louisville. I don't want to jump off the radar or off the rails, but I had said last week, Louisville and Maryland both have very important games for their program. They want to make a statement that they are not the same program that has been just falling short, been beating teams that they're probably supposed to beat, and then falling short the minute they run into a better opponent than them. Number 16, Duke. Duke, I still feel like, is a really good team. Notre Dame is not ranked ahead of them, but that's because they have a second loss. Even though I do feel like Notre Dame is a much better team, I think that this will play out naturally. Duke has a game against NC State this week that is a little bit of a trap spot. Going to be interested to see that. Then it's pretty simple here. Utah is 17. They beat UCLA at 18. UCLA beat Washington State at 19. That's just how I'm going to roll with it. Okay. And then Oregon State beat Utah. I get Oregon State also lost to Washington State, but I felt like Washington State kind of was able to catch Oregon State at the right time and with the right matchups. I feel like Oregon State is by far a better team than all three of those grouped together, but Washington State has plenty of opportunity going forward to be able to prove me wrong on that. Number 20, Air Force. Quit sleeping on the Air Force Falcons, man. You will see them on national television, hopefully. Hopefully that's another Fox game, just like Wyoming and Fresno State was when they play against the Wyoming Cowboys this week. And if not, it should be on CBS Sports Network. I'll be very interested to watch that game on Saturday night. I think it's on Saturday night, right? 21, we have Notre Dame. Again, I don't think they're a bad team. They're a 2-loss team. In fact, they're my highest ranked 2-loss team, and maybe I should have flipped them in LSU, but I think you're splitting hairs because I have LSU at number 22 there. I think Notre Dame just ran out of gas. I think they have a massive statement to make against USC this week, and we'll see. They're favored according to Vegas here, and a lot of people are kind of confused by that. I wouldn't be. Listen to Vegas. I think Notre Dame's going to win the game. Just a spoiler alert. But number 22, LSU, big time win. They weren't really supposed to win at Missouri, in my opinion, just because of the fact that this was such a letdown spot and they got down early. And this was a great job by Brian Kelly getting his team back up. Brian Kelly is a good football coach. That's all I'm going to say. Number 23, we got another SEC team in Tennessee and another SEC team at 24 in Missouri. And number 25, we have Kansas. I considered putting in Wisconsin, Kentucky, Maryland, who did look good against Ohio State, Miami, Wyoming, and West Virginia, who's quietly sitting at 5-1, 4-1, something like that. This West Virginia team is sneaky. Watch out. Quick rundown of the Heisman. I kept my top 2 the same. Caleb Williams, Michael Penix Jr. I also kept my number 5 with Luther Burden. I feel like he's one of the best players in college football, but I inserted number 3, Dylan Gabriel. Don't want to overreact and put him at 1 or 2 above Penix and Williams. I felt like Williams had big moments despite the fact that he did not play all that well against Arizona. It wasn't his fault necessarily that he didn't play well. Nobody was getting open. I think Carson Beck showing up onto the radar against the Kentucky Wildcat defense. I think Carson Beck is very much in this race. And right now, if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm like, I hope Tennessee and Missouri keep winning so that way we have more big-time platform games like that. And then Ole Miss as well. You get Ole Miss at home. So all that being said, there was my rankings. We got the recap out of the way. The preview research starts here in like 5 minutes. So thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good day.